Hi everyone, welcome to our In Conversation Music Beyond the Notes discussion forum, co-presented by PREMIA International Young Artist Music Festival and Tomley Music, sponsored by Steinway & Sons and Carey Properties, and with Childhood Folk Education Group as education partner. Today is the second part of the discussion forum, and we are extremely delighted to have Ms. Carol Yu as our host for the event. Carol is a Steinway artist, the founder, chairman, and artistic director of PREMIA International Young Artist Music Festival, and the chairperson of the Hong Kong Jockey Club Music and Dance Fund Awardees Association. Now let me pass the time to Ms. Carol Yu.
Hello everyone online. Welcome to the second PREMIA International Young Artist Music Festival. Today's forum is the second part of the forum series In Conversation, Music Beyond the Notes. First of all, I'd like to thank Tomley Music for co-presenting the forum series with the festival. PREMIA International Young Artist Music Festival is formerly known as Manhattan International Young Artist Music Festival, which I founded in 2017. The vision of the festival is to nurture young musicians, encourage them in the pursuit of artistic excellence, provide a cultural exchange platform, and to promote music development in Hong Kong. In the first festival, more than 250 young musicians aged 5 to 25 years old participated. The festival is unique in that all first, second, and third prize winners have the opportunity to perform at the prestigious Carnegie Hall in New York. In the first festival, I brought 25 prize winners to perform in Carnegie Hall Prize Winners Gala Concert with support from the Hong Kong government. This experience was invaluable for the young musicians. It was a milestone in their musical journeys and gave them a lot of encouragement. This year, we are holding the second festival. With generous support from sponsors, we have expanded considerably to include more events. The second festival now has 4 parts. Firstly, 2 discussion forums to explore and inspire music learning for the young. Secondly, there's the online competition for 4 to 25 years old, and we've expanded to include 13 instrument categories. The application is now open for this competition. Thirdly, we have the Carnegie Hall Prize Winners Gala Concert, and this is one of the highlights of the festival. This will be held in July 2023. And lastly, we have a series of 5 masterclasses conducted by the International Jury Panel. This provides a wonderful platform for the young musicians to learn from renowned performers and teachers. We're very glad to announce that we have Carnegie Hall scholarships this year to support prize winners with financial needs to perform in the Prize Winners Gala Concert. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors for the support and for believing in my vision. Our sponsors are Tomley Music, Steinway & Sons, Carey Properties, and our education partner, CTF Education Group. To learn more about the festival, please access our website on premierfestival.com. Now, back to the discussion forum today. The title of the forum is Music Beyond the Notes. We're going to explore how young musicians can go beyond just playing the notes on the score and how they can understand, express the music content, the poetry, and the essence of the music. Secondly, we're going to explore how to inspire musical learning and encourage motivation in the young. We are very honored to have 4 members from our international jury panel to be our speakers today. Let's welcome our speakers. Hello, Derek.
Carol.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, James. Hi, Megan.
Carol.
Hi, Chris. First of all, let me introduce our speakers. Dr. Derek Anthony, Director of Music and Drama Institute. James Cuddeford, Concertmaster of Hong Kong Sinfonietta. Megan Sterling, Principal Flute, Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra. And Chris Moyse, Co-Principal Trumpet, Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra. Thank you so much to all of you for taking time from your busy schedule to come and share your experience and insight with us. I'm going to start by quoting the famous Russian pianist and pedagogue Harry Neuhaus. He said that very often young musicians put too much emphasis on technique and overlook the musical content, the beauty of the music and the essence of the music. So, as performers and teachers, would you have any advice to young musicians how they can go beyond just playing the notes and learn to express the musical content and communicate? Derek, would you have any advice on that?
I think if you're preparing a performance and you're thinking of what it's going to feel like and what you want to express in the performance, so you actually practice the feeling of performing. And it becomes much more enjoyable than just practicing the technique alone. You know, that you see the end purpose of the whole thing while you're practicing. So that will make a difference, I think. You're already in the mood, you know.
So you have to think about the enjoyment.
Yeah, and the communication with the audience. I tend to imagine being in front of the audience when I'm practicing at a certain state, not at the beginning, but after a while, when it starts to flow, then you know that helps a lot. Yeah.
How about for young musicians, young learners? It's quite abstract, isn't it? Telling them to go into a musical content, and how could we as teachers inspire them or guide them in a way that they're going to understand, start to understand the music? James, would you have any advice on that?
Very big and good questions to start with. Of course, music and a whole lot of communication is such a huge subject. Maybe to follow on from what Derek was just saying about answering your first question first,
sure.
I think it's very important, like you said, for a student or a performer to get used to performing even for yourself at home, because it's a different way of thinking, isn't it? When you practice, you analyze a lot, and there's a lot of self-reflection. But when you're in front of 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, it's more about real-time communication. You don't have time to correct and analyze and look back on what you're doing, so you don't have that same critical function rolling in your brain. And I think it can really help nervousness. Certainly in my case, it helps nervousness if you get used to performing and used to the real-time rolling of things as they go, and less negative, I could have done that better in June, or something like that, which we all, every single person in the world who plays suffers from. So I'm sorry, I've gone back to your first question.
It's all right.
I was just thinking about how you answered. So
yes, the first and second is kind of related. I'm addressing, yeah. So Megan, would you have some sharing with us on that? How could we inspire young musicians to look beyond the notes and express the music?
Well, I think that when you're, if it's in your life, if it's something that is around you more, then it just becomes part of a way of thinking. You can bring that to a specific piece or performance experience. But if you're listening to music, or if you're singing or enjoying music, then you're at the same time learning the language of music, so it starts to make more sense to you, I think. And then you can more easily identify sentences and patterns in music that then, when we have this moment of realization, we understand then where the piece is going, and the shape of the piece, and maybe the drama of the piece, or the different qualities. That helps a lot as well.
Yes. It's interesting. You mentioned the language of the music, so we have to, in a way, help them to understand the language in terms of the musical phrasing and harmony, colors, really, isn't it?
And if one doesn't understand it first, then it's very difficult to. If we don't understand what we're doing, then it's very difficult to communicate that to somebody else or to an audience.
Yeah, and you also talked about the mood of the music, so that's something we could help them, focus on that as well.
Well, we're lucky with the flute because it's quite in some ways maybe a free instrument in the sense that we don't really have any obstructions and possibly a little bit like singing, maybe one of the closer instruments to singing. And so really everyone can sing, and whether you start tapping your toe when you hear a piece of music or moving your body or just relax when you hear a piece of music, I think we all do this without even realizing it or being conscious of it.
Even a toddler sings, isn't it?
Yeah, so just trying to not let the instrument get in the way of that just because you have a score in front of you or you're having a little bit of a learning process with some technical aspect.
So the singing is very important in music, would you say?
Absolutely, for flute, but I would say all instruments, yeah.
I always encourage myself or students and that to actively sing. It doesn't matter how terrible your voice is. I've got a terrible voice, but you sing and it's the intention behind the singing, or to make the bow in the case of a string player. To breathe, inhale, exhale, and exactly like a good singer would. So.
And as a singing teacher, I do the opposite. I ask them to think of phrasing and sing like you're a cello or a flute, or
teach you like
yeah.
What about Chris? You're representing the brass.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think I agree with everything been said so far. I think particularly we've hit upon the point that, obviously we need to have some basic level of technique on any instrument to be able to say what we want to say. But then after that, then music is about communication, about expression. And so I think this aspect of either imagining you're performing like Dr. Anthony is saying, or just even performing, it could just be a little informal performance to your family members, where you aren't self-analyzing so much, but rather trying to entertain. And of course, then if there's a mistake, you have to keep going. You can't just kind of go back and fix it. It's a performance. You're going to get to the end, come what may. I think these are very good things to be kind of bearing in mind when we're either in the practice room or preparing for something. Yeah. So I think that also engenders a sense of enjoyment as well, which hopefully is a good thing for anyone learning music. Yeah.
Yes, enjoy the music and think about sharing the beauty of the music, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. And it's very interesting that all of you think the singing element in the music is important. We had our first discussion forum a week ago, and it was conducted in Cantonese. And basically, all the speakers, we unanimously agreed the singing tone is so important in music, whatever instrument or whatever discipline. And we emphasized and re-emphasized during our discussion. So especially for piano, isn't it? It's a keyboard instrument, but a singing tone is really like a voice for pianists, is our voice. Would you say it's the same for trumpet? Is having a singing tone?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, like James was saying, it's something that I definitely encourage my students to do, is to even have a go at singing. It's not going to sound great, but I always encourage a student that I'm not going to judge you. This is not a singing lesson, but at least it gives me the impression that you are hearing what you're playing, and therefore when it comes to actually then playing the instrument, you know what you want. And so that's a really good thing. I think that, it is basically the most fundamental way of making music, isn't it? Singing, like you say, a toddler can do it. So you love to hear that in the street, kids singing, having fun doing that. And I think that's just, just such a foundational thing. And then, of course, we pick up a trumpet or a flute or a violin or, then we've got to somehow get that technical expertise to be able to kind of deliver that message on whatever our given instrument is, you know. So, yeah.
That's why Heinrich Neuhaus, the Russian pedagogue I mentioned at the beginning, he said that the first thing to acquire in technique is a singing tone. I totally agree. It opens the door for expression, isn't it? Yes. Yes.
Just one thing to add, I mean, obviously singing tone, here in Hong Kong we have access to different types of singing. So obviously when we're talking about the trumpet, I'm usually asking my students to listen to the kind of less of the Cantonese opera, which is that kind of more reedy sound. And we're talking about a Western classical trumpet here, so obviously we're more towards that kind of round, nice operatic sound, which is kind of warmer and more open. So that's kind of what we're aiming for there. Yeah.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah. Yes. And James mentioned earlier about breathing. You have to breathe with the phrase. So I'd like to explore a bit about breathing. Derek may be an expert.
Yes. Well, you know, it ties in with what we're talking about already, that come from the singing. It's about finding a natural feeling, whatever you're playing or singing, you know, that you express yourself with an instrument or with your voice, and you want to find a sort of natural flow, right? And of course, if there's a problem with breathing, different kinds of problems are possible, right? So then it will maybe stop the flow or not make it possible in the first place. And at least what I believe is that you have to breathe very deeply to feel like your whole body's involved, and then that way you're not just singing, but I think also for the musicians, the instrumentalists, you know, your whole body, your whole being is involved in making music. And that's where it gets exciting, you know. The technique part maybe is a lot of hard work sometimes, but then once you mastered some of the technique to solve the problems for the piece, right, then it becomes exciting. And that's where the motivation comes in, right, where it becomes even fun to practice, and you start to visualize you're going to perform this, and off you go, you know.
Once they start enjoy the music, then they are motivated, isn't it, to do better and achieve more.
Yeah, I think I'm always following up on what you're saying. You're getting my brain ticking.
Be careful with it.
No, but I think the breathing is completely fundamental to all music making, any instrument, but also for the sense of timing. So and for communication with others. So if you're in a string quartet, for example, how you breathe completely influences everyone else. If you're a conductor, how you breathe before even a sound has started, the intake, the upbeat of the breath is so important, or the exhalation. So quite often I'll experiment with breathing out before you play, because this is a very different sound to if you breathe in and play, for example. And in chamber music playing, this is fundamental, or if you're leading a brass ensemble or leading an orchestra from the front desk, how you breathe, you can tell immediately with sensitive people what sound will be produced and the timing of it. And so the breathing is so fundamental for communication and timing as well as everything else, as well as sound itself. So, yeah.
If I can add to that as well, I mean, the best piano accompanists I've worked with are the ones who breathe with you. Yes. You know, we've all probably worked with accompanists who didn't do that, and so they're actually bonk playing before you've actually really kind of set up the starting notes as well. So that's such an important skill, I think, for pianists as well as, you know, wind instruments and
yeah. Well, like you're on the same wavelength, is it? When you're sort of breathing in the same rhythm, you know, and then everything fits together, right? So.
I think from a performance point of view too, that's important to remember, especially if you play a single line instrument like flute or trumpet, that if you're preparing a piece, often you only have, you know, a half of the piece or a third of the piece sometimes, and the piano accompaniment can be extremely involved, and it's always very reassuring when you see a performer sort of playing with their pianist rather than just at the front and the piano's at the back somewhere, because of this communication element.
Yeah, breathing affects the phrasing as well, really, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how you know, if you work well with the accompanist, I guess, is because you breathe, as James was saying, breathe together in the same way and in the same manner. for pianists, I find that some of my students forget to breathe. They can be holding their breath, playing a long passage, and I have to remind them that you have to breathe, and pianists have to breathe as well, and breathe with the phrase. And sometimes exactly the same as what Anthony said, Derek said, that sometimes they don't breathe deep enough, and the same for pianists as well, I find. Yeah. So that's very interesting. That
makes it easier. If you breathe too high, it becomes less and less and less, so it increases the tension. Whereas if you breathe deeper, you become calmer and calmer, right? So it has a effect on performance nerves as well as well as the music, So it's like a total thing.
So it's the technique that's part of technique and interpretation as well. The technique is important, of course. We have to have sufficient technique to express the music. So in the aspect of the musical content, would you suggest how we can broaden the minds of young musicians, how they can understand music from a broader perspective, like going to live performances or going to other arts exhibitions, M+ Museum, and going to other performing arts performances? What do you think? Would that be? Would you advise that would open up their mind and knowledge as well?
I think one should try to immerse oneself in culture. Of course, particularly focus on what your new instrument and everything about that, and going to live performance. I think is most important to hear how it really works and hear good people perform, so that you're inspired by that and want to see if you can manage to do something similar. So you have and have an image in your mind. But beyond the music itself, it's important to think of all the other cultural things that come out of the same mentality, like dancing and acting and fine arts and everything. So the more you visit museums and go to different concerts and see operas and plays and movies, sometimes all these things together, they give you all these different angles on how to express yourself artistically. So we're just using just like different instruments, right? But the goal is the same. Just like we all talk about the same thing, even we play different things or I sing, right? So same principle. Right?
What about other things apart from arts? Would you advise your students to learn, be interested in more things in life? Would you think that would affect their music? Well, Neuhaus has a very interesting concept. He thinks that everything in our life is in the realm of music. Perhaps like when you see countryside, you meet someone, or you read a book, he thinks that things in life is in the realm of music, in the sense that when a performer plays a piece of music, subconsciously, they're actually sharing their life experiences. And I found that quite interesting. What do you think?
It makes me kind of realize, just when you were saying that how many great works of art, paintings or literature, but I think we're talking about classical music here, is inspired by nature. Very often you think it's like all these Beethoven symphonies, Sibelius, all this kind of lovely music, Vaughan Williams. If you are fortunate enough to have enough free time, I know that can be an issue for some of the Hong Kong students. They're so busy with exams and extra tutorials and whatever else, but we're fortunate in this city to have beautiful countryside. I do find that personally a very comforting and inspiring thing for myself. So you're talking about, in addition to going to see live music, which Derek mentioned, which I think is wonderful to have live music again in Hong Kong after all these COVID disruptions. But yes. I think coupling that with, just being able to explore the great outdoors can be a wonderful thing as well for young musicians. Can be very inspiring. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So broaden our lives' perspectives. I think so.
I think also a lot of, or a part of playing an instrument can be very physical as well. And so just, keeping your body healthy and activating, especially with the breathing for wind playing or singing, can help a lot. And
I know you like hiking a lot.
Sorry?
I know you like hiking a lot.
Yeah, and running. Yeah.
She's very fit.
It's very aerobic. So then it becomes all sort of synthesized rather than just, this is my academic music practice time or my moving around time, or it can all sort of blend into each other, and you can actually avoid a lot of technical problems by feeling comfortable with your body, and being active already will then transfer into your playing and technique.
Probably the worst thing a student could do is practice 6 hours a day, lock themselves away. I mean, if you can't get your work done in 2 or 3 hours, it's probably something wrong, and you become like a dog chasing its tail around and round. And so right. I think getting out there, immersing yourself in everything. I mean, totally. Bringing it kind of back to music. I mean, I'm always amazed when someone comes and they're playing a work of Beethoven or something. They don't know any of the string quartets of Beethoven. They haven't played any of the violin sonatas or the 32 piano sonatas. They're coming from such a weird, actually, angle. You've got this immense body of music to immerse yourself in. If you're just playing a work of Beethoven, you have to be immersed in his writing for... I mean, I wouldn't dream of trying to play a Beethoven sonata without, having... I mean, even just listening to it. So I find there's a very narrow approach. I think it's probably... I wouldn't say it's worse in Hong Kong or worse anywhere else, but probably more, 2022 as we speak, probably more so than before, despite the great availability of music out there. Not to be able to just sight read through a string quartet with your friends, or just click on YouTube and get to know some of that immense body of music. It really amazes me. It happens over and over again. People coming from a very particular angle, and that's very unhealthy. So I suppose if you're learning a piece of music, you need to get to know the body of music by that composer, by the people writing at that time, the art at the time, how much birdsong then influenced Beethoven, and so on. There's a huge sort of circles of, activity around what Beethoven was doing to put that one dot on the page. And just to examine that one dot is not healthy. You have to find what's going on around.
Yeah, I think that's really excellent advice. And so when we learn a piece of music, we should learn, explore the background. And also, if we're playing a piano sonata, we should also understand, listen to the composer's other works in order to get a better perspective of his style, isn't it? Yes, you're absolutely right. I think it's modern days, there's just too much distractions around, isn't it? For children, they could be games.
I think also if one has a chance to travel and visit historical places, very interesting, So I made a point. I walk through Verdi's home and see all the scores. He has scores of Mozart and Beethoven in the room, right? And a nice garden outside where you can relax and feel the nature, right? And I've been to Mozart's home where he wrote Eine kleine Nachtmusik and Marriage of Figaro. And just sort of walking around these rooms and sort of look up the ceiling and all this interesting stuff on the ceiling. When he slept or woke up, he must have seen that, and so on. So I've tried to make a point of doing that. And so when you travel and try to sort of, if it's possible, fit in something like that. It can be composers, obviously, but also famous writers, right? And it's very, very interesting. And it sort of just adds to the whole atmosphere. You walk around the streets there where they were, if you're in an old town in Europe, for example. Right? So,
Time to go to
seep into the interpretation, into the whole outlook and how you approach music.
You get a feel for it, right? Sort of, and then, like you said about the historical periods, whatever that is for the piece of music, right? If you have some sense of what what was life like in those days, how people look and dress and so on. So what I enjoyed very much about opera in the beginning was you have these costumes where you feel like you're in a time machine, you know. You're singing Mozart and you're wearing the same clothes as they did at the time, and you're moving like them, and you're trying to sort of capture the whole behavior, and it's fascinating. You know? So.
I think also, Carol, you mentioned about so many distractions. I think it's nice if you could try to sit with the music, sit with things, and sort of enjoy the process. And that's a little bit like what you're saying as well. So not thinking of learning or practicing as just being that time spent with the instrument, on a particular piece, but or rather not feeling like there's a lot of pressure associated with that time. So you can open yourself up to a sort of more ongoing learning process. And then when you have that time, also to just enjoy the process of learning something and preparing it for performance, rather than just fixating on the end goal of getting onto a stage or getting a prize at the end. I think the discovering of the piece and the process and how that happens, the changes that happen in your body or the realizations that you make during that process.
And that gives them the motivation, isn't it, to in the music learning?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, it's very, when you have understanding, that's, when you have the eye-opening experience of, oh, yes, I get it now. Things fall into place, whether it can be either to do with the oral aspect of the music, or it could be a technical aspect, or it could be all of these things coming together, and you suddenly understand the context and the language of that particular piece.
That's very interesting sharing and very useful as well, because I find that there's this common scenario that when young learners start learning an instrument, they're very keen at the beginning, and quite soon after they lose interest and they don't want to practice. So that would be a good advice, isn't it, for young learners?
Yeah, I mean, it's always motivating to have a goal. That's a great focus for learning anything. And but I think if you're only fixated on the goal, then very soon they run out, or they don't have the same effect anymore, or maybe the result's not what you want. And so I think to look for something deeper beyond that is more important.
Right.
Yeah.
Goals okay, but technique's okay. But it's got to be some
Part of a wholesome.
Yeah, but it's part of something bigger, right?
Yeah.
So would there be some methods on practicing that could help them enjoy the practice, and would, as a teacher, what are the ways that we can help them to keep them motivated, or are there ways that we can help them? What do you think?
I wonder if there's a way. I mean, I'm thinking back to when I was a boy and, practicing trumpet. I would tend to sort of think to myself after school, well, I've got a maths exam coming up, I've got the history homework to do, I'm going to get them done, but what I'm really looking forward to later is practicing my trumpet, and that's going to be my fun activity, maybe a little bit of television as well, but wonderful. That's going to be the thing I'm really looking forward to doing once I've done all the boring stuff, right? I sometimes wonder, possibly in Hong Kong, whether the piano or the violin or the trumpet, whatever it is, the extra sort of curricular musical activity, I wonder if some people have the kind of perception that it's part of the boring bit. It's part of the maths test and the history homework and whatever other stuff you've got to prepare. I just wonder how, or it would be a great thing to generate that sense of enjoyment. Again, one of the things in Hong Kong, often music can be a bit of a means to an end to get that certificate, to get that competition prize in order to get into the better school. I understand that that's how, the system kind of works. But, along with that, how to generate a kind of passion, which I see here. I don't think any of us here would be doing what we do if we didn't enjoy it, right? How to sort of get that into some of these young Hong Kong musicians and keep them wanting to do it, beyond getting the grade 8 or whatever thing they get.
Chris, I remember you had a very interesting start. learning the trumpet from playing in the church, wasn't it?
That's right.
And
So-
you were greatly motivated by that. Would you like to share with us how?
Well, sure. I think so,
started?
because from the age of about 8, I was given a trumpet, shown how to play it. And then the next Sunday, I was playing in the church band. So talking about, having a goal, you would say, or even you'd say an audience, it's not strictly an audience, it's a religious service, but it's, it's people listening, right? So you're pretty much thrown in the deep end in that particular school of learning. So you're not really having any time to think too much about, things. You're just getting straight in and have people listening to you, and you want to try and make it sound good, So that was a unorthodox way to learn, I would say. And then, of course, over time, you're kind of picking up more and more off the older players. They're showing you how to do it. But there wasn't much room for introspection there. You're just kind of pretty much straight away in the public eye. You're playing and people are listening. So that was somewhat different to a more conventional route. I didn't do, unusually for a British person, right? I didn't do any of the ABRSM exams until I got to grade 8. My GCSE music teacher said you should probably do this, so I went and did it. I didn't grow up through that system of kind of exams and
But I remember you were saying that enjoyment and passion for the music was what motivated you, wasn't
very much
it?
so, yeah, absolutely.
More than attaining grades and technique, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So it was just basically sheer enjoyment, just the fun also of doing it with your friends as well. I think that was an aspect of it. You're playing in an ensemble with your mates, basically, your contemporaries, and doing something together, making music together was, a great motivator as well. Yeah, so I think that generated that enjoyment, rather than being stuck in a practice room, being kind of told to practice or else. Basically.
Just like another school subject, isn't it?
The interesting thing there is that since you did that, then you learned so much that you just went ahead and did your grade. Not the other way around, you see. You learn to enjoy first, and then you gradually improve, and then you're getting better because you're enjoying it. And
of course, when you're that age, and then of course someone says to you, "What are you going to do for your career?" And I had no doubt in my mind that this is what I want to do. I mean, it's not for. I mean, a career in music's not for everybody. I'm not suggesting that, but similarly, it's something that people should enjoy more, I think. Yeah.
But can I ask you a question too?
Sure.
When you started playing at church, you didn't feel like it was a big performance? You just felt like, oh, here was an opportunity. Is that right?
I think so. I mean,
people were very encertain. It was
I think so.
Sort of a safe environment for you to
to screw up, and nobody seemed to judge you too badly. But similarly, there was certain levels of expectation that made it want to sound good, as well.
Nice context.
I think so.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think there's no one singular formula that fits all for music learning, isn't it? That's the beauty of it, I think, isn't it? Every child is so different, and we have to work with every young musician differently and be flexible. Yeah. So
I think one of the great dangers is trying to make everyone fit into one, going through the grades,
absolutely.
Going into competitions, even at an international level. I mean, it might be ironic me talking about this in this forum, but that's not the only way to go about making music. And I think if young kids, like Chris was saying, particularly in Hong Kong, often do it to get a result, to get an A or to get an A+, or to get into a certain school or so on. This can be quite dangerous because it can start to kill that creative aspect of music making. So I think anything which I encourage my students, or if I'm ever asked for advice, I always encourage people to sight read, play through a lot of music, not to pass the sight reading section, but to get to know Beethoven's other piano sonatas, to come back to what we were saying before, or to improvise, or to compose. I compose all the time, more than play, or to improvise constantly with perfectly natural, real-time creativity. And this touches on something. It's not for everyone, but we have to realize until the mid-20th century, it was for everyone. That's how everyone made music, through improvising or through composing. So we can do that actively, kind of sight reading. Sight reading isn't just that little 10% component at the back of a, which that's not what sight reading is. Sight reading is getting to explore the great body of music.
Absolutely.
Which will influence how you play your next piece of music, which will, it's this ongoing, sort of devouring appetite for music making. So I try, and often my students, or I see students, even at a very high level, really high level, it's so obvious within 1 minute they haven't been exposed to that. So sometimes the first thing I would do is say, okay, let's read through a Bartók violin duo together. And because you've got very simple right through to quite complicated. So there's a lot of this type of music out there, which is great to sight read through with students. So I'm partly saying this to encourage other teachers as well, or parents to do that with their kids, because then it touches on something deeper. You find a purpose for making music and to make it creative and not just ticking off a little grade or passing an exam or getting second prize in a competition. It's sort of secondary in the bigger scheme of things, at least in my
And the thing is, if you think that way, you're more likely to pass those exams.
Exactly, yes, you will. It will just become if you're playing in a church from a young age, it suddenly performing is natural and so on. And if you're sight reading amongst your friends, it's hard in Hong Kong. We all live in our little apartments tucked away from each other. So, but if there is some way that you can always just find a group of people you can sight read something through. I was very young. When I was 12, I went to Yehudi Menuhin school. The more valuable than having a lesson with Rostropovich or Menuhin was you just sight read music through string trios or duo sonatas with your fellow colleagues. You're 14-year-old and you just play through, Spring Sonata or something. It's just natural. And by the time you've left, you've sight read through, 30 Haydn quartets or something. It just happens. It's part of your daily activity almost. So this is really important, I think. Centrally important.
That's right. You mentioned about competitions. Nowadays, a lot of young musicians do enter competitions. Are there benefits to competitions? And if they're entering, what kind of attitude should they adopt when they are doing these competitions? Would you like to share with us, Derek?
Well, you can think of this as something useful. It's not like everything shouldn't revolve around the competition, but it's good sometimes to put yourself in front of a whole different group of people, a different situation, and just sort of see what kind of response you get from that, right? And if you are working the way that you just described, right, then you'll be quite happy to perform in those situations. You perhaps feel more like a performance than a competition, which is also key to succeeding in the competition. If you feel like you're struggling to beat someone, I think there will be a very negative impact on the playing or the singing, right? So it must be sort of beyond that, And then so the competition can be a useful tool, and you treat it like a tool. And so you do some competitions when you feel ready and the requirements are suitable for you. You do that, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's c'est la vie, huh? That's life.
Okay, what do you think?
It's nice when you have often competitions have set repertoire or own choice, and so it's a chance to play music that you love or possibly learn new music that you wouldn't normally choose to learn, and usually I would be excited by the practicing process, by the learning process. And by the time you've invested that energy into learning a body of repertoire, if it happens to be for a competition, then you're actually excited to play the music. That for me has always been the main focus. Like, oh, I really can't wait to play this music. And then, you know, if something comes out of it, it's just really a bonus. By the way, it's just on the side. But the real excitement is knowing that you've invested that time and energy into learning the music, and it goes inside you, and then you have a chance to perform it.
So if you look at it with a positive attitude, it could be used as a tool and a short-term goal to motivate them to play even better, isn't it? If we emphasize the process rather than focus on just the result, if you win something, it's a bonus.
It's a bonus, yeah, exactly. And actually, often we learn a lot from not winning something. You know, if you get some negative feedback, or if you have a bad experience, often we learn more that way than if we have a good experience.
That's correct.
And sometimes, I mean, music is if you like, a non-quantifiable sport, if you like. So really, it's just a sort of a given set of opinions on a particular day anyway. And there's been many times where, personally, I've felt I played really well, and you know nobody says anything. Or other times where I think, oh, that was terrible, or I'm so tired, and you know you get a lot of positive feedback. So sometimes your experience of performing is not always the experience of the people listening to you. And I suppose, so you can actually add it to your deeper knowledge of life learning and musical learning as well, and experience.
Yes. So competitions can be a tool for young musicians to improve their musical skills, and at the same time to have personal growth and character development, isn't it? Would you say that? Yes.
I think that's the most important aspect, And the actual placement, and that's kind of secondary. I mean, of course, easy to say that, but if you believe in that, it really, really helps, because it does affect how you prepare. And one of the things I'm personally, one of the dangers of competitions is, I think, this quest for ultimate safety in technique and performance. This is so dangerous, because you get to these, again, from local competitions right through to international competition, people with an extremely secure technique, but very little more to say interpretively about the music. And this is a danger of competitions, and one goes for this what's the word? This goal of ultimate safety, where you'll never make a little slip or anything, but you'll have a very sterile, clean performance, which might get the safety mark from all the jury. This is a real danger of competition. So much so that one of my very well-known old teachers said he would like to start a concert agency. This is for international level. For people who came about 5th or 4th in competitions worldwide, because they're the ones who maybe took some risks, have something more to say, but it somehow didn't quite gel. But often the 1st and 2nd and 3rd place are often cold, but there. And it's very interesting. I often think about this. Those people who are around, maybe, 3rd, 4th, or 5th in a competition often are more creative than some of the ultimately secure ones. I mean, a big generalization, but it's quite common. And even when I've been on jury, and you almost never completely agree. It's rare to be completely unanimous in a jury. It's often the way. Someone who's just not 1st or 2nd. So it really doesn't mean that much if you come 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, or 4th, or 5th. It's something bigger is behind it.
And would you say so, Chris? Sometimes when the young musicians, when they don't win a prize, as Megan was saying, it could be a positive experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
They go back and reflect and work even harder for the next one.
Well, I mean, I never entered that many competitions myself, but what I have done, which is also very competitive, is auditions for professional orchestras. And so over the years I started to do some auditions, and didn't get very far in the initial ones. But what I did find was that I got better at doing them. The more I did, putting myself under that kind of pressure, where you're very exposed, you're playing in front of a panel, you learn to deal with the nerves better each time, I think, if you take it positively. And as long as you can then not take the setbacks too personally and turn it into something positive, I think that you can actually grow as a musician and as a person as well, just being able to deal with kind of like setbacks and disappointments to the point where you just improve and improve, I think, as well. And just one other aspect, you're talking about preparing for a competition. I've got an experience when I was a juror for one of the universities here in Hong Kong for their music major program. All of the students have to come in and perform a 10-minute program, contrasting pieces, and they have to do that to get their degree. What I do remember agreeing with my colleague, who's a fellow juror, about was that I think the best impression we all got were the students who treated the jury exam not as an exam, but as a performance. They actually went in, performed, showed themselves, and showed something about their character, their personality. It was just so much more off the page, and made us kind of sit up and take notice. And I think, generally speaking, gained extra marks for that as well. Yeah.
So the advice, I would say, isn't it, consolidating everyone's advice, is to treat exams, performances, competitions as performances. Enjoy the process, enjoy music, that's the most important, and don't just focus on the result, isn't it?
The other thing that everybody has sort of touched on a little bit here is, without saying the word, is that it makes you learn how to be professional. When you have a task that must be done within a certain time, fulfill certain requirements, so yes. That is a useful experience. It's just like the competition itself is not everything, but it's a very important part, right? So like you said, you do all these auditions, and sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't succeed, and go back and you learn something from that. So I think it's very important to learn to think of every let's call it not necessarily failure, but something that didn't work. Okay, so there's always a chance to learn more from that.
Yes.
So if you take everything that you first think is negative and you turn it into something positive, I can learn from that. If I don't get number one, then what can I learn from that, right? And then you have to learn to be very honest with yourself about what are your strengths and weaknesses, and then you do differently next time, and you try another one, and so on. So. But in the end, the competitions are just sort of tools to measure how you're doing, because there are many other things that you're doing that are ultimately more important than the performance itself, and so on. So I think the professional side is also one that's a good learning experience for that. Yeah.
I guess that's how one improves, isn't it? With a lot of other things in life. You do more often, you reflect, and you improve, you get better. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned before, Carol, about maybe having young students who are very enthusiastic, and then as time goes on, maybe it's dropping off. There can be a whole number of reasons for that. I guess a school or other interests that take over. But that is something that perseverance and resilience. You definitely need those qualities to play music, but it's very useful in life in general, and so through music you can have these experiences where you can have the excitement of something going your way, but not everything goes your way, and the setbacks, and as Derek said, what you learn from that, and you can develop that resilience and perseverance.
Yeah, that's why there's this term called holistic music development, isn't it? Holistic. Yes. Or the whole person development, isn't it? Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Sharing.
Yeah, I think the life lessons you get from going through all these experiences in music, they are applicable to many other things in life, right? And vice versa. So sometimes people even choose a different career, and but they can learn so much from the music experience. Because if you have learned to prepare, organize, overcome stage fright, improve yourself, go through all these processes, right? Then you can take the same principles and apply to anything else. So, and actually vice versa, right? So, yeah, one has to see that link as possible.
My daughter's always rolling her eyes because I always say my daughter is always rolling her eyes because I say that's just like music, and she says not everything's like music. I said, well, it is. Actually, it's all connected.
Yeah. You touched on stage fright just now. That's also something that a lot of musicians face. Would you have any advice on how to tackle stage fright? How to prepare oneself better so that we could control the stage fright?
That's another big subject.
Big subject.
Well, the word you mentioned already, prepare, is part of the way to avoid it, right, or to reduce it. The other thing is the way you think about nerves. Now, we sometimes think about nerves as something very negative, and you feel the stress, but I always think there is a good and bad stress. So if you can take that nervous energy and flip it into something positive, you can have a very exciting performance. Right? So
right.
As long as you let the negative feeling of the nervousness sort of get to you, then it's hard to sort of get through over the threshold. But once you leap over the threshold, then it's all, you can go anywhere, anything is possible.
I often think of being nervous as being your most heightened state of being alive. Like, if you think of being dead is there, being nervous is amazing. It's incredibly positive. No?
Yes, the adrenaline.
Whether that's running away from a lion or going on stage, that feeling, you're at your ultimate.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're 80 years old or 8 years old. That feeling, we're lucky to be alive. Gosh, we're getting deep. But you're lucky to be alive. You're lucky to be channeling your energy at that moment to do it. So use it positively.
Absolutely.
The worst thing must be just never be nervous for your entire life. And that must be a weird thing.
Sometimes students ask me, do you get stage fright? And I say, well, I'll be... Or you get nervous performance. I say, I would be nervous if I don't get nervous.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I say, if you don't get nervous, you don't care.
Yeah, when that happens, I remember.
If you care, you will get nervous.
Once or twice I had bad jet lag, having to get on stage quickly. I remember once a long flight to Birmingham, and as a string quartet, and we were so dead, we weren't nervous at all. But it was partly because we were playing at like 4 a.m. Australian time. It was such a hard performance. No one was nervous. And, you're just impossible to play.
Yeah, it becomes a routine and
you don't play
dull.
Well. So nervousness is a good thing. Yeah.
So actually, that's part of the thing one has to learn to deal with that excitement level. As I talked about in the first question, about when you practice, after you overcome the technical challenges, and then start to feel the excitement of the music. So that you can start to visualize, imagine you can do this in the performance, and then say, okay, I need to press a bit more to be able to do that all the time, and then gradually you can just sort of switch the button on and off you go, right? So, but that takes a lot of preparation. So all this technical work and the practicing and all that stuff, that helps you actually to overcome that. So people want quick answers. They want like a quick fix. Take a pill and you get rid of nervousness. Actually, you want it. You want to feel, like you said, right? You want to feel the energy. So you just have to learn how to use the energy in a positive way. Then you can have very exciting performances and maybe even win a few competitions, right?
Chris, would you agree?
Well, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, I've definitely reflected upon that. Yeah, if you're not nervous, it probably shows you don't care, right? But at the same time, doing it as we've all been doing for some years now in the business, in the music profession, nervousness I think never really goes away. People are surprised to hear me say that because I've been doing it so many years. But actually, no, you still get nervous. But one thing that happened not so long ago, of course, sadly during COVID, we had several months where we just didn't do any concerts, and when we came back to work, we were performing to a camera. So we were not actually doing performances to audiences to begin with. Then later on, the audiences came back, which is wonderful. I was actually a bit more nervous than I had been before, because I think I was out of practice performing to people. Right. So I think also nerves is something that you get better at dealing with, like I was talking about with orchestral auditions or competitions. I think the more you do it, the more practice you get at kind of knowing how you respond and dealing with as well. So yeah, I've always said as well that preparedness is also a good feeling to have as you go on stage. If you feel underprepared, I think you've every reason to be more nervous. So if you feel like you're in control of what you're doing, you've done your homework, you've done the preparation, then you feel a bit more ready, and therefore you can feel more in control, I think, as well. Yeah.
Definitely. So the preparation is definitely a key point, in addressing the issue of getting nervous on stage. We have to be very well prepared. And secondly, as Chris was saying, I think our body reacts with increased adrenaline level, whether we like it or not. It's a natural phenomenon. And I very often have to tell my students, don't be afraid of this. And because that heightened state, as James was saying, actually makes us play better. Actually, I love that adrenaline as well, just like you. I love being on stage, and I just create something very magical on stage when I'm very well prepared with that adrenaline. So just to let the young musicians know that it's not something that you should be afraid of. Because sometimes I think they get nervous, even more nervous, because they're afraid of this feeling. Don't you think so? When they feel that it's not what they feel how they play in the home, it feels different. So, and Chris also mentioned that the more you do it, it's better. So that, I think that's very, very useful advice. So, young musicians out there, and enjoy your performances and don't be nervous. Yes.
One typical question I get is, how do I not be nervous? And I think it's important to recognize that most of the time the nerves don't go away, but it does become more manageable. And
one thing is you can you try to rechannel them, right? But it's good to know some coping mechanisms, like breathing deeply, things like that, just calming down. And one of the things that make people nervous is when the situation is new. It feels new and different, right? So for example, if I'm going to perform in a new place, I like to walk around on the stage before the performance and just sort of feel the atmosphere and the size. And so that what I'm trying to do is to eliminate all kinds of uncertainties, to the point that's possible. So of course the performance itself has risk involved, right? But like sort of little things that could distract because it's just new or different. Try to sort of be aware of that beforehand, so that there's less things to trigger your distraction and make you nervous.
That must be that's your domain as a pianist, where the instrument is often completely new.
Completely new.
Yes, of course.
Right.
That must be nerve-wracking, I'd imagine. So, lucky I have my own. I just bring.
Yeah, you really have.
But that one can change a lot too, So,
You are your own instrument.
Yes. You mentioned one thing that's very important as well is when talk about you get into let's say the zone when you're performing and the excitement, that's very important to get this experience. Some psychologists call it a flow experience or an in-zone experience. I remember some years ago I met a businessman who was talking about his marathon running, and we were discussing the experience of running the marathon, which I haven't done, but the way he described getting into the flow at a certain point is just like I recognize the same when we're performing. And so this can happen in all kinds of activities. You get to a point where you of course you still have nervous energy. You want to have it, but then you make use of it, and then your performance can get really, really exciting. And that, of course, when your preparation better be good.
That's right. That's right.
You can kind of monitor yourself and still feel free. Yeah.
You mentioned that we should try to avoid things that's going to trigger, and even small things. For myself, I'm just sharing. I'm sure all of you are as well. I'm very careful with what I eat before, on the day and beforehand. Some people like to eat banana because the potassium seems to calm them down. And I tend not to wear something that's too tight and makes me uncomfortable. Would you say also the dressing the dresses?
Oh, for sure, absolutely. I mean, the ideal the ideal outfit to play the flute would just be a big sack, because no restrictions. But you know, we have to. It takes years actually sometimes to find things that you're comfortable to wear. Definitely not having distractions. It's particularly hard for females too, because if you're playing a wind instrument, you want to be flexible in this area here, but a lot of outfits, you know, are often very tight. You have to consider the material. Eating, you mentioned bananas. I know that's popular with lots of musicians. For a wind player, I think that's one of the worst things to eat because there's a lot of activity down there. But definitely, or things like, for me personally, garlic makes me very, very dry. Yeah, definitely.
I think, there's so many solutions to performance nervousness and anxiety.
Routine, exactly. Just find something that works for you.
Yeah, and I find, I mean, it's changed. Like what might have worked for me 5 years ago might not work for me now.
That's true.
So one has to be constantly renewing how you prepare. Not renewing for the point of it, but just aware that maybe your needs change or so on.
Very good suggestion.
You know, little changes make a big difference. Like suddenly we had to wear masks playing, or at least, you know, you think, well, so what, violin's here, but huge difference. Where, you know, one, it's not clothing, but it's like an article of clothing, putting a mask on, playing. So little things like that can disrupt. So just being sensitive to all of these things is, just part of your ongoing monitoring, self-monitoring of being a performing artist, I suppose.
And by the same token, I think not being too precious about it either. Like if routines can be stabilizing, but then
you might have to play with great jet lag. Like I was saying, things are out of your control.
Yes, or not always comfortable.
Go on stage having never tried the acoustic. Occasionally it happens. So you have to be prepared, but prepared to be unprepared. But I suppose for young kids, enjoying the nervousness, trying to accept it and channeling it in a positive way. Yeah, and not doing anything stupid right before playing, like play basketball and expect to play well. I mean, of course.
So we've come to the end of the forum series. Thank you so much to our speakers for sharing with us their invaluable insight and practical advice. And to our online audience, I hope you've enjoyed the sharing and that the sharing has inspired many young musicians. Thank you to Tomlin Music for co-presenting the forum series. Many thanks to the production team for their efforts. We have a full team here. And thank you to the Steinway & Sons team also. The second PREMIA International Young Artist Music Festival has many more events coming up. There's the online competition for ages 4 to 25 years old, and we're open for application now. There's the Carnegie Hall Prize Winners Gala concert, and that's going to be held in July 2023. And there's also a series of 5 masterclasses for all competition participants. Thank you once again to all our speakers, and thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again in the festival's future events.
Thank you, Carol, and our 4 wonderful guests for this inspiring discussion. Please stay tuned to our upcoming events. And thank you once again for joining us today.